You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. You know, regardless of the size of your business, if you are just starting out by yourself as a solopreneur, or if you are growing and want to scale your business beyond the startup and into the six-figure, definitely the seven-figure range, you're going to need a team of people. Now, whether you hire them as employees or whether you affiliate yourself or partner together with other people, other vendors, other contractors, other specialists, whatever the nature of that team is, you know the old acronym, together everyone achieves more, team. And you've got to have a team to get to where you want to be in your business. You can't do it by yourself. And you've got to figure out a way to get the team to work in harmony with each other and with you to align your team with your personal, your professional, your business, your corporate vision, whatever that vision is. So how do we get our teams to do what we want them to do? How do we align our teams around a common set of values to achieve the goals that you know you want to achieve and that you can achieve? But it seems like sometimes working with teams can be a difficulty. Well, here to solve that difficulty and to help us navigate that is Bob Gower. He is the managing partner of the Alignment Company. He's an authority on Agile software development, lean theory, and responsive organizational design. He has advised leaders at companies you've heard of like GE, Slack, Wikimedia, and Spotify, just to name a few. He's the author of the books Agile Business and Radical Alignment. Bob Gower, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Hi, Ralph. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background. What got you interested in working with teams, working with the kinds of organizations that you do, and the cultural significance of your work? Because as I was perusing not just your business website, but your personal website, you've got a very interesting story, interesting background, very colorful background. And so tell our listeners how that shaped your philosophy, your approach, and now how that helps you work with the people that you do today.
Yeah, so I've always been really passionate about how people come together to work. So early in my life, I was a construction worker, actually. I was a carpenter, I was a stonemason, and I worked on a lot of construction crews. And, the crew makes the difference in your work life, right? When people are coming together and you develop this sort of language with each other, it's almost like unspoken language. You know when you're in sync with other people and you know when you're not. And, I went on to study philosophy in undergrad school, and I studied business in graduate school with a focus on sustainability. I also spent a lot of time traveling. I did martial arts in Japan. I studied meditation there for about 6 years, and eventually landed in Silicon Valley, where I was working in sort of startup environments, helping to build digital product. So as you said, like I've had a rather colorful, and that's only a portion of my professional background, but I have a rather colorful professional background. But what I found everywhere was it really felt like the team is what made the difference, both in terms of my personal experience day to day, just my life satisfaction. If I looked forward to going to work, if I had a team that I wanted to work with, that I felt had my back, that I trusted, that I respected, and I felt respected me. And likewise, I think there was a huge difference in terms of the outcomes, the products that we would create. I think we just create better stuff when the team is aligned, when the team comes together. And so as my career advanced, I began working with teams kind of further up in organizations. And now I work pretty exclusively with leadership teams in organizations of a variety of sizes. Right now, I've got one client who's about 15 people, another client who's about 500, another client that's about 100. So I'm working with kind of medium-sized businesses right now, though I have worked with, GE and Spotify and these much larger companies as well. But what I found is that it's these leadership teams that are essentially their product that they're designing is the organization. And so I really care about the sort of life satisfaction of employees in organizations. And I also care about, again, sort of the social or environmental performance of organizations. And I just think an aligned leadership team, one that's really coming together for the right reasons and in the right ways, they're just going to produce better stuff for both for themselves and for the world.
So when you say that you are an authority on Agile software development, lean theory, responsive organizational design, define those parameters, and how does that tell the story of aligning teams in using these various tools? How does that fit together?
Yeah, well, I don't want to give you a full lecture on each of those today, but I'll say that the sort of the underlying philosophy that sits underneath those three things, and they all have, let's call it sort of similar intellectual and philosophical antecedents, but they all kind of come from a similar place. Lean is perhaps one of the kind of the oldest of the bunch, where the Toyota production system and lean manufacturing. Agile software development takes those principles and then applies them to the development of complex systems like software. And then responsive organization design takes those same principles and applies them to the design of the organization, sort of how teams are structured. But the philosophy that sits underneath all of those things is that an empowered and engaged workforce is really the difference maker. It's really the thing that makes the difference. So when Toyota was trying, back in the 70s and 80s, when they were really trying to enter the global market, they wanted to, improve their quality. They went to the people on the front lines and they said, "You probably want to do a better job. Tell us how to do that job, how we can help you do that job better." This idea, you perhaps have heard the term servant leadership. There's a wonderful book about that, and it's a sort of a philosophical idea that sort of sits at the heart of my work. But it's this idea that people have an inherent or an intrinsic desire to do good work. Most people do. I'm not saying that there's not exceptions to the rule. I've met many people in my career, I think we all have, who are sort of slackers by nature. But most people, most of the time, we're human beings. We are motivated by, community. We're motivated by helping each other. We're motivated by shared problem solving often. And so I think the ideas around sort of agile, lean, and responsive organization design turns the traditional mold of leadership on its head. And it says, you probably want to do a good job. You probably want to add value. You probably want to take pride in your work. You want agency. You're motivated by mastery. You're motivated by creativity. So let me help you have that. And you tell me what you need in order to do good work. And so when I talk about team alignment in my work, it's often really about setting up the right expectations, assembling the right people, and then getting them aligned around a common goal, and then getting out of the way as a leader. I don't believe in micromanaging as leader. I think if you're micromanaging, having to tell everybody what to do, you probably haven't done the work to bring the team together in the right way. So really the modern leader's job is to set the actually, I think it was Tony Hsieh at Zappos said it, that he saw his job as to construct the greenhouse inside of which the plants all grew, which maybe kind of a tortured metaphor a little bit, but I think it's really apt that we are creating a system inside of which that inspires people and aligns people, because we have to stay synchronized, we have to stay coordinated, right? You can't just have a free for all. But at the same time, if I'm depending upon me telling everybody what to do as the CEO, one, I'm going to get exhausted. I know very few people who really enjoy that kind of work or that kind of behavior. And two, it's just going to move really slowly. And probably three, we're going to do really poor work because people are going to feel disempowered, disengaged, and you're going to have high attrition and not get the job done in the speedy way that the modern environment requires us to do.
Yeah, that's really important for us to hear, we who are entrepreneurs, especially because we tend to be micromanagers. We tend to, first of all, we don't want to delegate. We don't want to build a team. We want to, and we prefer just to keep everything small and do everything ourselves, because we believe no one can do it as good as we can do it. And that's the kind of mindset that maybe helps you in the beginning stage of starting your business. But if you ever want to scale beyond startup, you've got to change that mindset and look at ways that you can bring other people in and not micromanage, not hover. And that's really a transitional skill, I think, that most entrepreneurs don't have. They have to, it's a skill. They have to learn that in order to take their business and their organization to the next level. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I'm also a small business operator over here. And, maybe we teach what we do, what we need to learn ourselves. And maybe that's how I got into this, right? Is that I was promoted to manager, many times throughout my career. I worked in newspapers for a while, and I was a design director. I mentioned I worked in software. And so I would frequently find myself, I was a good individual contributor. I was good at my job. And then I would get elevated to this place of manager, and then frequently sort of director level. And I think director level and VP level is where things get really interesting, because suddenly you're actually not responsible just for people like you, individual contributors who may be, as a design director, I just ran other designers, right? That was pretty easy. But when I became, directing a team of people who were producing software, suddenly I didn't know what other people did. I couldn't direct them if I tried. I had no idea, the skill set was so specialized and so detailed that it really wasn't it would have wasted a lot of my time in order to learn their job. But at the same time, I was responsible for the output of that team. And so what I found is that it really comes down to about three things when we think about building good teams. One, I think efficiency really matters, right? That if we are constantly struggling with inefficient systems or inefficient tools, inefficient meeting structures, we just get frustrated. We get annoyed with each other. We waste our time. We don't, and output is kind of bad. But at the same time, there's a whole series of things we need to think about, which I term as sort of effectiveness. And efficiency and effectiveness, I think, are two very different things, because you can build the wrong thing really quickly, and I've seen teams do it, right? Or if you're going 80 miles an hour in the wrong direction and you speed up to 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, you really haven't improved things, right? So there's a whole, and sometimes the most effective thing you can do looks rather inefficient on the surface. And so I really try to help teams think through their strategic positioning, think through, are we really aligned and are we really moving in the right direction? Have we thought of the customer in the right way? Have we thought of ourselves in the right way? Do we have product market fit? Do we have product maker fit, right? Like, are we building the thing that we're most capable of building? And then the third piece, which I think is really the secret sauce that sits underneath all of this, is interpersonal relationships. We could call it culture. We could call it, satisfaction. I think there's some terms in psychology about subjective life satisfaction or something like that. But really what it boils down to is, do I trust the people around me? Do I feel respected by them? Because humans, we really care about, of course, security, which often is what money represents to us, right? We want to have the money and to buy the things that make life worthwhile. But we have an equally strong psychological need for status, and we really do need to feel respected by the people around us. It's a very, very strong psychological need. And when teams don't respect each other, I think you're just going to run into trouble. A friend of mine who runs a software company, and he's positioned. He talks about joy at work, and he talks about the business value of joy. And one of the things he always said is, like, if I showed you two teams who were equally skilled, and one team really cared about each other and was joyful and enjoyed coming to work each day, and the other team was kind of grumpy and didn't really like each other very much, which team would you choose? And everybody universally chooses the happy team, chooses the joyful team, chooses the team where people have each other's back, where people care about each other and respect each other.
I would probably choose a team that is maybe not as skilled, in what they do, but they've got joy in their work, they might actually in the long run be better to work with. Even if it takes a little bit longer, I'm going to enjoy the process a lot more.
100%. 100%. There's a really interesting, this is a thing that I talk about a lot in my work, is the architecture of trust, right? Like how we decide whether we trust somebody or not. And if you look at the social psychology, they've done a lot of studies, and they realize that when we decide who to trust, we're really making two different assessments. One assessment is around capability. So if I think about myself, if I'm out rock climbing and I'm on the end of the rope, I'm on the wall, with my knees shaking, trying to make this climb, and somebody else is on the other end of the rope and they have to catch me when I fall. I want to know that they're capable. I want to know that they have the skills, the physical strength, the know-how, all of that in order to work the equipment and catch me if I fall. That's, they've got to have that. But more importantly, and this is where the psychology of trust comes in, I need to know that they care about me, because all the capability in the world will not make up for a lack of care, a lack of attention. And so there seems to be evidence that we actually ask the care question unconsciously first. So first we're assessing whether or not somebody cares, and second we're assessing whether or not they're capable. And so that kind of mirrors what you were just saying, right? I would rather have the team that cares a lot, that's joyful, that is emotionally oriented towards the work in a positive way. I'd rather have that team, as long as they were minimally capable, as long as they were, could do a good job. I would rather work with them than the team which is, full of A-list superstars who have no idea how to work together. Right? You can watch, you can see basketball teams, like bunch of great individual players stealing points from each other and losing the game, right? Yeah. And so we see the same business all the time.
How has, because we're this discussion is taking place in the post-pandemic reality of business, how has the pandemic changed the way teams function? Assuming that a lot of teams have had to readjust how they work, where they work, how they interact. I think it took a lot of people initially by surprise, and now we're still trying to adjust to the realities of, well, some people are at home, some people come in, there's friction. How do we sort through all of that and still be able to achieve team alignment in this environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously it's changed my business quite a bit, because I'm essentially a management consultant. And so my life before the pandemic, I spent a lot of time on planes. I spent a lot of time running meetings and in front of rooms. And I spent a relatively, some amount of my time was from my home office, but the majority of it was in person. And of course that flipped on its head almost overnight, as it did for most of us, for many, many people. And what I found is that on a fundamental level, it really didn't change anything about what I cared about. It changed some of the tools we needed to use. It changed, the way meetings happened. Obviously, we all learned a lot about Zoom and being present on video, and then we learned that it was maybe valuable to allow people to turn video off, because we didn't want to invite every single person all day long into our home, right? And so we needed to give people a little more agency and a little more space about. A lot of the leaders I've worked with recently, like, I don't see them on video as much anymore, because we realized that the video can feel kind of invasive and has its own level of exhaustion. So that's kind of in the details. But at the heart of it all, I think what the pandemic really showed early on to me was there were teams that I thought were doing okay that really weren't doing well. And because we suddenly had to be coordinated in an asynchronous way, or we had to be coordinated across distance, that it really showed us the weakness of certain teams. It also really has updated my philosophy. If your listeners know about Agile software development, one of the sort of core principles of Agile, at least in the early days, was cross-functional, co-located teams. And so Spotify really pioneered this. Every team had their own room. Every team had their own board to work from. Every team, teams had their own space, and this was seen as really important. And there were ping pong tables, and there was distractions, and there was all these things that sort of we think of as sort of the modern company culture. And what I've really found over the last 2 years is most of that is unnecessary, and even allowing people to stay at home and work at home and avoid the commute, which can be such a downer for so many people. And also, take care of their kids, take care of their home, feel like their lives are a little richer. Their lives aren't just work anymore. Their lives are a little bit richer. That what we find is it actually improves teamwork. It actually improves productivity in organizations. And frankly, I've been really surprised at how little disruption there has been to many of the teams that I've worked with. That we've certainly had to adjust, but if a good team can function asynchronously and or in a distributed way almost as well as they can in person. Now, I'm a believer of bringing people together periodically. I think planning sessions, I think having a face-to-face experience of somebody really helps us communicate better when we go back to video. But I just don't think it's necessary that often. Bring people together once a year might be enough. And a lot of companies I know have moved full distributed during the pandemic, and they're thriving.
Yeah, I mean, and if nothing else, we probably don't need to have face-to-face contact 40 hours a week, 5 days, a week. But once a year, that might be sufficient, and just to keep in touch. But it sounds like what you're saying, Bob, is that the distinction between work and life balance, there really is. Those distinctions are becoming blurry now, and your work is your life is your work, in a very healthy way, by not trying to compartmentalize things, but finding that joy by achieving some level of integration in a happy, productive way between my personal and my professional life.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as leaders, one of the big lessons I've seen, for myself and for the leaders that I've worked with, is that if you're not able to clearly define what success looks like for an individual team and an individual role, then your only option in order to judge productivity, which of course we really care about, is sort of like, well, how long did someone spend in the office, or how stressed do they look, right? There's that old thing from Seinfeld where George Costanza used to pretend to be really stressed at his job so people wouldn't give him any more work, and sort of gamed the system in that way. And I've done that. I mean, I swear I've done that, myself at jobs. And because we get very cynical when we think all the boss cares about is how many hours I spend in my seat. And so what I've really pushed most of the teams that I work with is that we really have to get better at measuring success. And that doesn't mean we have to measure everything. It means we have to pick a couple of measures that really matter. And then we also have to hire well, train people well, and we also have to learn how to trust people and trust that people are going to get the job done, and judge their performance based on whether or not they're getting the job done, not based on whether or not they're at my beck and call, because people have other things going on in their lives. Like certainly I don't want people ignoring my emails or ignoring my Slack messages, but at the same time, messaging somebody on a Saturday night and then getting mad when they don't text right back because I'm their boss is I think pretty bad behavior. But also, we need to be able to look at someone and say, are they successful in the role? And we need to have some objective measures in place in order to do that. And I think a lot of organizations simply don't. So that's something I've been pushing a lot of the leaders I work with to have put in place these days.
Yeah, and you've actually got a course that's launching pretty soon for new leaders. Tell us more about that course and when and where to take part of that.
Yeah, so we haven't announced the launch date yet. We keep getting pushed back a little bit because we're getting busy with client work, but it looks like it's going to launch in January now. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind the course is, so I would say the work that I do, with the team here, we're focused on two things. One is teamwork at the top, right? So we work with leadership teams, but this is highly bespoke work. This is high touch work. This is facilitation. It's coaching. It's consulting, but it's really helping these leadership teams perform better. But one of the things we realized when we do this work is that if a leadership team is going to get aligned and perform well, that next layer of leaders becomes really, really, really important. And so what that team really needs is to have leadership everywhere else in the organization, almost as leadership as an emergent property. And so the way we define leadership is really a little bit different. Like I don't think of a leader as having to be necessarily charismatic or visionary. I think a leadership has to be good at helping the team create efficiency, helping the team create good relationships with each other and with the leader themselves, and also helping the team, take on, effective work and know what they're doing, know how that success is measured. And again, like setting up that greenhouse. And so I've created this course. It's a 4-week course, and it's for new leaders. And it's really the course I wish I had when I got promoted all those times and then sort of like faltered and failed even at times. When I'm suddenly put in charge of a team, okay, now what do I actually do with the team? It's not about mindset. It's not about believing in yourself. All those things are great and are important, but it's really about the nuts and bolts of what do I do when I want to lead this team and how do I know when I'm successful? So we course around it. And if people want to come to our website, it's at alignmentco.com, sign up for our mailing list, and we'll let them know as soon as it launches, and they can be part of the first cohort.
Yeah, I think this is really important, especially as we said, the times that we're living in, the shifts in business and in work. And, if you're listening to this and you're just starting up, you're just starting out, it may be a little far ahead or farther ahead than where you are right now. But I think most of our listeners are beyond startup. They're in the scale-up mode. And if you're struggling to get from startup to 6 figures or 7 figures, and you're still in this mindset that you're trying to do everything yourself, you definitely need to look at, how do I create a team and how do I get that team aligned, as Bob is talking about, getting really good, that's your job, at creating teams that are efficient, effective, and really good and personal with each other, creating the culture and the joy in business. I really like that concept. And, think about it. This is what a Rebelpreneur does, creates the business he or she needs so they can live the life that they want. And I'm convinced that good teams will help us get where we want to be a lot faster, a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, do more good, not just for you, but for your people, whether they're affiliates, employees, partners, whatever the case may be. So this is really good. Go check it out at alignmentco.com. That's Bob Gower's website. You can sign up for his newsletter and find out more about this leadership course that will be available very soon, Leading Great Teams. So, Bob, this has been an interesting discussion. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of it, but any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Just that I think good teams can really change the world. Like, we as humans, we got a lot of tough problems in front of us, whether they're economic, environmental, social. And I think the more we can come together as teams, and as the small group of people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. I can't solve the big societal problems, but we can solve these sort of small day-to-day, like, who are we working with and what are we doing? And I think these teams, this focus can really be transformative for both your organization and for the rest of the world. So thanks so much for having me on and helping me spread the message.
Absolutely. Bob Gower is managing partner of the Alignment Company. He's an authority on Agile software development, lean theory, and responsive organizational design. He's advised leaders at companies you've heard of like GE, Slack, Wikimedia, Spotify, and many more. And he's the author of 2 books, Agile Business and Radical Alignment. You can find out more at alignmentco.com. Bob, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your expertise that you've shared with us here on Rebelpreneur Radio.
Well, thank you, Ralph.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.